How many siblings do you have?
I have 25 in cult math. 3 of them are no longer alive. Um, my mother herself had 8 children, and 7 of them she had in 14 years before the age of 30.
Oh my God. And the other siblings are from your dad's side?
So, like, because my biological father is this dude who was 39 years old in the cult when he impregnated my mother, and he has 6 other children that we know of, likely a lot more because sex cult.
But you found out like later in your life that he was your dad, right?
Right. I didn't find that out till I was 12. In the meantime, my mom, when she was 16, was then married off to another teenager for the purpose of disguising who was the father of this child. And so he's my legal father on my documents. He's the father of my younger sister, and then he has 2 more sons. And then my mom married a older generation patriarch who had already had 8 children. Sorry, 8 children with first wife, 2 children in between, and then they had 8 more children together.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing about this, but it makes so little sense. Like it.
But this
How
is
could
where
you
this is
justify
where we
this?
but this is where we talk about the comedy, right?
Hmm.
Because, for example, those 2 kids that my stepfather had in Brazil with this woman, right? I've had conversations with other cult survivors, and they're like, "Oh, I know your brother. Do you know him?" And I have to just be like, "Actually, we played together twice when I was little, but no, I don't really know him." Right? And like, what other situations in the world do you have that discussion? It's
So,
just funny and
and
sad.
when I learned about this, it's like how do they justify this? How does it make sense? How do they make it make sense? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. So this is what all of my work is kind of based around, is getting people to understand that, like, a cult is not a static thing. It's a journey that they're kind of bringing you on. Right. And so, it starts off, this man, as we mentioned, always an incestuous pedophile, always awful, but his followers don't know that. Right. Like, one of the ways I describe it now is it takes 6 months to fully onboard into both the Children of God cult and the US Army. And until those 6 months are over, you have no idea what you signed up for. But once those 6 months are over, you're pretty firmly in the group.
yeah,
And
they don't take you and show you a PowerPoint presentation like, hey, this is all you're gonna do from now on. It's like they give you a little by little
a little bit at a time.
until
And
it's
in
too
the
late.
right. And in the meantime, they're giving you mission and community and purpose, right? This is the love bombing. They're teaching you a new language, which is part of isolation, but they're actually also usually isolating you, either physically or by just taking up all of your time. Because these days with technology, you can be in a full-blown cult while having a normal life. But they are bringing you like further and further into this. And then another piece is wacky rituals, right? So children's marriage ceremony to the prophet, not the first ceremony that these people had been involved in, right? There's a huge series of wacky rituals. And in Uncultured, the prologue opens with a wacky ritual, which is in the military on the first day of basic training, in the Army at least, and you're holding a 50-pound duffel bag over your head for 3 hours, right? And they arrange for it to be either pouring rain or burning sun. And there's 2 things about this wacky ritual that are very, very significant for group
It's
behavior.
like the baptism for the army.
Yes. And the things about this ritual is it's impossible, right? Nobody can actually do it. Like, everyone's dropping their bags. Everybody's not good enough. Part of breaking you down.
So
But it's also
they give you something to work on.
exactly. But
Right off the bat.
it's also irrational, right? You've never done this. You've never gone outside and just held 50 pounds above your head for no reason for 3 hours. And so research shows us that once you push yourself through an irrational thing for a group, you are so likely to not question future irrational things. And so it's even when I didn't know that, what I could see on my first day in the Army was that was the breaking point, and people either pushed through it like I did, or they went that night and they, with all the sensitivity to suicide attempts, they performatively kind of scratched their wrists or did a kind of public cry for, I want to go home, I want out.
This is it, yeah.
Yeah. And
this
that
is not
was,
for me.
Right. And this was the point, right? And for the rest of us, for the 99% or whatever who stayed, we were so much less likely to question anything in basic training.
It's like a filter, right? It's like a filter to know who could be the person they could break after this, right? Like, and I don't know where I read it, but I read something about when you get involved in something nonsense like this, like cults or these weird rules or whatever, once you're in, you tend to, you don't want to prove that you were wrong. So you keep going in deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper.
Right. And this is actually the term cognitive dissonance, which everybody knows, actually comes from cults. And a lot of people don't know that. But in the 50s, this psychologist named Leon Festinger hypothesized that there was this doomsday cult. And he hypothesized that after the apocalypse didn't happen, they were not all going to go home. Right? And that flew in the face of psychology at the time. Sure enough. And there was a distinction, and it was between like the people that had really burned their bridges and really devoted their whole lives to it. Like they needed it to be true. And so they actually doubled down harder. They accepted whatever explanation they're given. And even the evangelizing becomes more intense. I call this the Rudy Giuliani thing. Right? Like Rudy Giuliani made some choices in life. He is no longer going to be known as America's mayor, right?
There's no way back.
He's going to be known as the guy in front of Total Landscaping, Four Seasons Total Landscaping with dye dripping down his face. So he has to go down with the ship, right? Like I do not see his eyes being opened because he is one of those members that has just gone too far into the cognitive dissonance.
Yeah. It's like when you are a victim of a scam, like they get money from you, you're so invested that you want to believe there is a way for it to work out for you, right? So you keep going in, and it gets worse with time.
And this is actually such an important thing. I'm so glad you said that, because when people do realize they were in a cult or that they were conned in a scam, the first thing they feel is just that overwhelming embarrassment and shame.
You don't want to be an idiot. Yeah.
Right. And so many cult members just get stuck there forever. They cannot, most of the adults who joined the Children of God cannot admit that it was bad, even as their children have a suicide rate that has been compared to Holocaust survivors. They cannot admit that it was that bad. And so because of shame and embarrassment. And so they just will not let themselves see it.
Yeah, and they don't want to admit they did that to their children.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you lost 3 siblings. I don't know if it was recent, but I saw you post something about your brother. Was it recent, or you were just remembering him?
It was very recent. It was last December.
I'm sorry about that.
It was last month, and it was the little baby boy that I was sort of given care of at 8 years old. I mean, it was Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that. Was he out of the cult
Too.
already, or?
He was out of the cult. He was the only other one of my siblings who was also a veteran. So like he'd lived with me as a teenager, and then I'd mentored him during his time in the army, and I'd also tried really hard to fight the demons with him afterwards. So it was very, very heartbreaking.
I'm so sorry.
Um,
And obviously a consequence of the cult.
absolutely.
Like it's a direct consequence of it. What about your other two siblings? The same thing?
So in my opinion, they're all a direct consequence of the cult. I honestly, none of us are yet 55. So everybody who's not alive, I think is, kind of a relevant consequence of the cult. However, so my first sibling was one of the 8 children of the patriarch stepfather, and he died as a young child. So it's not somebody that I knew.
Okay.
It really bothers me when they leave him out of the story of how many children were had. And he died as a result of just medical neglect, preventable. Baby died of pneumonia.
Because we don't believe
Because we don't believe in
doctors.
Exactly.